The story you think you know about Joseph and Mary, the one told in Christmas pageants with bathrobe-clad children and cardboard angels, barely scratches the surface of what actually happened. Strip away 2,000 years of sanitized retellings, and what emerges is something far more extraordinary, dangerous, and profoundly human than most people realize. Picture Nazareth in the 1st century. Not the peaceful village of Christmas cards, but a dusty backwater clinging to Galilean hillsides, where Roman soldiers patrol roads and whispers of rebellion simmer in every marketplace. Mary is young, perhaps 13 or 14 by modern reckoning, though this was typical for betrothal in her time and culture. She's already engaged to Joseph, a tekton, which we translate as carpenter but really means something closer to craftsman or builder. Joseph works with his hands, shaping wood and stone. A man of modest means trying to make an honest living under occupation. Then everything changes. Mary receives a visitor, though calling Gabriel a visitor feels inadequate for describing an encounter that would shatter her entire understanding of reality. Ancient texts describe her as deeply troubled by his greeting, not flattered, not immediately joyful, troubled, because she understood something modern readers often miss: what Gabriel announced would destroy her life as she knew it. In a society where an unmarried pregnant woman could be stoned to death, where shame clung to families for generations, Mary said yes to something that could cost her everything. Her consent wasn't naive acceptance. It was an act of staggering courage. Now consider Joseph's position. Matthew's Gospel tells us he discovered Mary was pregnant and, being a righteous man, planned to divorce her quietly. Read that again. Righteous. The text doesn't present Joseph as vindictive or cruel. He's described as righteous specifically because he chose mercy. He could have made a public spectacle of her perceived betrayal. He could have demanded the full penalty of the law. Instead, he chose to protect her even as his own heart shattered. This is the Joseph we rarely talk about, a man wrestling with devastating betrayal, trying to do right by a woman he loved who appeared to have broken every promise between them. Only a dream stops him. An angel appears to Joseph in the night, revealing the impossible truth. And here's what's remarkable: Joseph believes. He takes Mary as his wife anyway, knowing full well what the neighbors will say, knowing the whispers and sideways glances that will follow them for years. He claims a child that isn't biologically his and raises him as his own. Joseph becomes history's most consequential stepfather, and he does it while absorbing the social cost of a situation he didn't create. But the story grows darker still. Caesar Augustus demands a census, and everyone must return to their ancestral hometown for registration. For Joseph, that means Bethlehem, nearly 90 miles from Nazareth through dangerous territory. Mary is heavily pregnant, probably in her final weeks, making this journey on foot or perhaps riding a donkey through rough terrain in the heat or cold. Think about the physical reality of this. No hospitals, no pain relief, no emergency services. Just a young woman enduring what might be her first pregnancy while traveling through wilderness where bandits operate freely. They arrive in Bethlehem, and there's no room. Luke's Gospel uses a word often translated as inn, but it probably means something more like a guest room in a family home. Bethlehem is packed with returnees. Every relative's house is full. Joseph and Mary end up in a kataluma, likely a cave or lower-level space where animals shelter. This is where the Messiah enters the world. Not in sterile majesty, but in the smell of animal dung and hay, with a teenage mother in agony and a stepfather doing his desperate best to help. Jesus is born in conditions most modern people would consider unthinkable. Mary wraps him in strips of cloth and lays him in a manger, a feeding trough for animals, because there's literally nowhere else to put him. The King of Kings makes his first bed in a box where cattle eat. No midwife is mentioned. No attendants. Just Mary and Joseph in the dark, holding a newborn and trying to understand how this fragile, crying infant could be the fulfillment of centuries of prophecy. Then come the shepherds, rushing in wild-eyed with stories of angels and heavenly armies filling the night sky with songs of glory. They find exactly what the angels told them they'd find: a baby in a manger. These weren't romantic figures. Shepherds were considered ritually unclean, social outcasts who lived rough lives in the fields. Yet they're the first evangelists, the first to spread the news of Jesus' birth. God's kingdom announces itself not to priests or kings, but to the lowest rung of society. The timeline gets murky after this. Most Christmas narratives collapse everything into one night, but Matthew's account suggests significant time passes. Joseph and Mary apparently move from the kataluma into an actual house in Bethlehem. Jesus might be anywhere from several months to 2 years old when the Magi arrive. These aren't the 3 wise men of tradition, the text never numbers them, and they're better understood as priestly scholars from Persia or Babylon who studied the stars. They've traveled hundreds of miles following astronomical phenomena, carrying gifts suitable for royalty: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. But their visit triggers catastrophe. King Herod, paranoid, brutal, nearing the end of his reign, hears about a rival king born in Bethlehem. His response is methodical genocide. He orders the execution of every male child 2 years old and younger in Bethlehem and the surrounding region. Scholars debate the scale of this massacre, but even if it involved 20 to 30 children, the horror is incomprehensible. Families destroyed, mothers wailing in streets, all because one insecure tyrant couldn't tolerate the whisper of competition. Joseph receives another dream warning, and the family flees in the night. They become refugees, escaping to Egypt with almost nothing. Think about this journey, hundreds of miles through desert with an infant or toddler, running for their lives from state-sponsored murder. The gold from the Magi probably funds their survival, providing resources to start over in a foreign land where they know no one. Jesus spends his earliest years in exile, a detail most people forget. The Savior of the world grows up as a refugee child in Egypt, displaced by violence, dependent on the kindness of strangers. The family remains in Egypt until Herod dies, which historical records place around 4 BCE. Only then do they return, but even this is complicated. Joseph initially plans to settle in Judea, but learning that Herod's son Archelaus now rules there, he fears for Jesus' safety. Another dream redirects them to Nazareth in Galilee, back where they started but forever changed by their experiences. And then, silence. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John tell us almost nothing about Jesus' childhood and early adulthood. We get one story: Jesus at 12 in the temple, amazing teachers with his understanding, and then nothing until he's around 30 years old and begins his public ministry. These are the hidden years, and they're maddeningly empty of detail. What we can infer paints a picture of ordinary life and extraordinary circumstances. Jesus grows up in Nazareth, learning Joseph's trade, working with wood and stone, feeling splinters dig into his hands. He observes Sabbath. He attends synagogue. He learns Torah. He watches his mother's face and perhaps sees the weight of secrets she carries, mysteries she's pondered in her heart for years. He has brothers and sisters, the Gospels name them, though later tradition would struggle with this detail. He experiences sibling rivalry, family meals, neighborhood friendships, and the rhythms of small-town life in occupied territory. Joseph disappears from the narrative at some point, never mentioned during Jesus' ministry. Most scholars assume he died while Jesus was still relatively young, leaving Jesus as the eldest son responsible for supporting Mary and his siblings. Imagine Jesus in his 20s, a skilled craftsman supporting his family, knowing who he is or perhaps still discovering who he is while living an apparently normal life. The creator of the universe measures wood. The Word made flesh negotiates prices in the marketplace. The light of the world sweeps sawdust from workshop floors. This ordinariness matters profoundly. Christianity proclaims that God didn't just visit humanity briefly, he became human fully. Jesus experienced everything we experience: hunger, exhaustion, physical pain, the ache of loss, the frustration of misunderstanding, the comfort of friendship, the satisfaction of work well done. Those hidden years weren't wasted time. They were the incarnation being lived out in all its scandalous particularity. When Jesus finally begins his ministry, he carries with him 3 decades of human experience. He's not a divine being playing at humanity. He's fully God and fully human, bearing in his body the memories of refugee flight, the calluses of manual labor, the grief of losing Joseph, the complexity of family relationships. When he speaks of daily bread, he knows what it means to work for it. When he talks about persecution, he remembers Herod's soldiers. When he shows compassion to outcasts, he recalls shepherds in a stable and his own family's social stigma. The birth narrative and hidden years reveal something essential about how God works. He doesn't arrive with overwhelming force. He enters through a teenage girl's consent, through a stepfather's faithfulness, through poverty and displacement and years of patient obscurity. The story of Jesus' origins isn't safe or sanitized. It's shot through with real danger, genuine suffering, and the mundane struggles of ordinary people trying to survive and remain faithful under impossible circumstances. This is the real account, messy, human, and infinitely more powerful than any cleaned-up version could ever be.